Good
afternoon.
Thank you all for being here. We are so thrilled that you can join us, and we're so thrilled that we can begin by breaking bread together. So welcome. My name is Lee Rayford, and
I am Tiana Paschal.
We're working on our tag team right now. This is the first run of our routine that we're going to take on the road. We are professors in the Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies, and together we are the co-PIs of the Black Studies Collaboratory here at Berkeley.
The Collaboratory is a recipient of the Mellon Foundation's Just Future Grant, a collaborative initiative to address racial inequality through bold and unique humanities-based research projects. Today's event, On These We Stand, Collecting, Documenting, and Archiving Black Lives and Cultures, curated by our BSc Elder in Residence, Ms. Daphne Muse. Is part of a larger spring event series organized by our amazing Abolition Democracy Fellows program of the BSc. You can find out more information about that series at our website, blackstudiescollab.berkeley.edu.
We're live in this room, and we're also recording a live webinar that's happening as well. But for those of us who are joining you, wherever you're joining us from, we are here today at the Social Science Matrix on the campus of UC Berkeley, which is sited on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone, who are the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. One way to make concrete such land acknowledgements is through the payment of Shumi land tax, a material way for non-Indigenous people living in the East Bay to participate in the rematriation of land to Indigenous people. And there'll be, for those of you who are joining the webinar, there is a link in the chat.
Before we turn it over to Ms. Muse, curator and moderator of today's event, we want to thank all those who made today possible. BSc Project Manager Extraordinaire, Barbara Montano. BSc Graduate Student Assistant, Gilberto Rosa Duran. Undergraduate Research Assistant to Ms. Muse, Abby Simmons. The Department of African American Studies, helmed brilliantly by Chair Professor Nikki Jones. We would like to thank Eva Seto, Director of the Social Science Matrix, for her generous and brilliant support of this event and beyond. And all the staff here at the Matrix for running today's webinar and their excellent tech support. Our Spanish language interpreters, Marcy Valdivieso and Elena Velez. Ann's Catering for the Good Eats, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, today's panelists for making the time to join us and share with us today. And we want to thank the ancestors always, and all of you for joining us on the webinar. Shout out to the people on Zoom. And we want to thank the curator and moderator of today's event, the inimitable Miss Daphne Muse, seasoned elder in residence.
So Ms. Daphne Muse is many, many things. She is a caretaker, an activist, a writer and teacher, a cultural broker and curator, an advocate for marginalized communities, and a longtime ambassador between the university and its surrounding people. You can read her bio at the Collaboratory website, and that is, while it's incredibly impressive, we've all come to learn in the Collaboratory that it only just scratches the surface of what is a rich and unconventional life of radical commitments. But rather than read her bio, Tiana and I would like to share what Ms. Muse has been to the BSc.
A generous mentor and a fierce interlocutor. You brought us much laughter, joy, and tears, and many, many heartfelt hugs over this year. You also challenged us to ground our work in our rich and complex histories and to speak plainly. You welcomed us into your home and brought us gifts, both intellectual and material, each their own archive.
Ms. Muse, you have been our North Star and our plumb line, that architectural tool that draws a straight line and points us where we need to go and where we come from. Each and every one of us has been shaped profoundly by your presence in the BSC. And we just want to thank you for all you do and for all you are. And we're really excited about this panel.
Thank you.
I'm having the time of my life at this party. Best gig I ever had. I would like to thank all who were able to set aside the demands of your day to join us in the African diaspora on this journey into collecting, documenting, and archiving Black lives and cultures. I am most respectful and appreciative of the Professors Tiana Pascal and Lee Rayford for inviting me to serve as the inaugural elder in residence for the Black Studies Collaboratory, and again for the 2022 and 23 year. Invited back. Many thanks again go out to Barbara Montano and Gilberto Rosa Duran for handling the logistical and technical matters related to making this event a reality. The research, scholarship, and creative projects conducted by the BSC Fellows include a cadre of postdocs, doctoral candidates, and undergraduate students who have gifted me with a year that has become a tremendous, phenomenal learning experience and allowed me to better understand how upcoming generations hear, see, feel the beats, smell, and taste the world. It really is a different world rotating on an axis that now wobbles on the spin cycle of climate change. I hope their Afrofuturistic visions will play a significant role in realigning that axis. Archives hold the historical receipts and document and reveal the innovations, philosophies, and cultural dynamics of a society. This work is coded in my DNA. Without scholars, curators, intellectuals, and archivists like those serving on the panel, the power of Black lives and cultures would be pounded by the hammers of revisionism and relegated to obscurity. In a time of raging debates around so-called critical race theory and book banning, collecting, documenting, and archiving Black lives and cultures across the diaspora remain an essential foundation for Afrofuturism. This panel has been assembled to address some of the challenges mounted and the victories met related to how we preserve the voices and visions of Black intellectuals, creatives, activists, historians, tech pioneers, and workers. I'd like to start out by introducing our panelists in alphabetical order. And then we will do the presentation. Bamadeli Demerson is the chief curator at the African American Museum and Library at Oakland. He received his undergraduate and graduate training in cultural anthropology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. He also earned the MA degree in museum studies for Southern University in New Orleans. Results of his anthropological fieldwork in Ghana and Nigeria in West Africa and in Haiti. Brazil and Southern United States in the African diaspora have focused on comparative family studies, spiritual traditions, and visual art. Demerson also taught at Washtenaw Community College in Ann Arbor and Southern University in New Orleans. His research initiatives have been presented at national and international conferences as well. You can read more about him on the website, and I hope you will dive deeper into the bios of each of our panelists. And at the end, I should say, once the panel is over, Dr. Demerson is going to guide us through evaluations of materials that people have brought and submitted on the website to talk about. So I'd like to start out by introducing Francesca. I have a thing about pronouncing people's names correctly. Francesca Aduho. Francesca Adahuo. Araujo. 3 tries, I got it. Okay. Do not want to disrespect people's names. Francesca is a second-year doctoral student in Black Studies, African Diaspora Studies, who focuses on anti-colonial and anti-capitalist insurgency and coloniality, centering oral histories, memories, and subjectivities outside of the documentation regimen and reading the world through the Caribbean as its focus. She is especially committed to epistemologies arising from Black Latin, DAD, and DR and Haiti as an insurgent island unit, and Black Dominican histories against US and hegemonic state elite dominant narratives based on valorization of Black aesthetics over materiality, collective relationships to bodies of water and the Caribbean and Brazil, and in relation through this is a new word for me. Say it again. Would you explain what it means?
Sure. Right now?
Right now. In this moment.
Okay. Americanidad is a term coined by Delia Gonzalez, who's an Afro-Brazilian feminist. And it's kind of like an analytic through which we can think about Afro-diasporic communities in a way that isn't bound by nation state boundaries or nationalist identifications. And it's specifically really important because it helps us shift our focus from US centric thinking about Blackness and thinking about Afro-Brazilian communities and Afro-Caribbean communities and what it would mean to lead politically through that horizon.
Would you start us off? And congratulations on receiving your master's degree. Yes. Start us off.
Sure. Thank you, Miss Muse. Well, I'm really happy to be here with everyone on this panel who has done so many things, especially just as a second-year PhD student who has not done all of those things. But so, yeah, I am here because this year I had the true honor of being the archivist for the Black Studies department, which is not how the position began, but it's just what it became, which I feel really lucky that I'm the person who ended up being able to do that. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk about what it's been like doing that. And I wrote some notes for myself. But the first thing I want to say is that when I came into archiving, which in this specific instance really means sorting through, handling, and cataloging all of the materials that the department has been able to safely collect throughout literally the decades. I didn't really know that much about it. It's very overwhelming. And I walked into a room that has a past that I have no relationship to, which is a reading room that has been remodeled because of Professor Fischel and Professor Rayford's amazing work. And I just saw all of these boxes with like so many VHS tapes, hundreds and hundreds of VHS tapes. And I was like, wow, what is archiving actually? Like what does it entail? What is that? And Kathy Neal and Sina, who's here, who's the Asian American and Ethnic Studies librarian, were two people who were so amazing and such amazing guiders in this. And it's just been so cool to meet librarians and archivists and be able to learn from them and see all the work that goes into it that I felt like I already appreciated a lot, but I actually now am like so astounded by it. Yeah, so the first thing, one of the questions that Miss Muse posed in preparing for this panel, which has been really helpful, is how the work I'm doing is helping faculty or students in any way. And the first thing I thought about as a second year PhD student is how the archive is invoked in conversations in grad school in a way that's like super abstract and ephemeral and like very poetic, like the archive. And it, the archive is that, and it can be that in a lot of ways, but actually cataloging, sorting through, creating a narrative and feeling the heavy responsibility of that is a reminder that the archive is actually also a very concrete thing that demands manual labor and physical labor, and it impacts your body, like to pick through these VHS tapes, to flip pages for hours, to type into a spreadsheet for hours. Like that's also what the archive is. And I think, yeah, so that's what I think I want to lead with, is especially for grad students in earlier cohorts. It's been nice to be able to have conversations like that where we're kind of, our point of departure for the archive is all of those very ephemeral conversations. And at least from the discussions I've had with some of the students in my department that I talk to frequently, we've been like, how do you even find an archive? Like, where do you go? So it's been really cool to be able to share that, like the actual menial tasks that aren't as ornate or like that don't sound as poetic. And yeah, let's see what's next on my notes. Oh, the other thing is that I think for people who have not been in this department since its inception, which is like the first course offerings in the 1970s, it's been amazing to be able to construct an origin story of the department for myself, but also for people, for other students. And in a way for some faculty members, not that people don't have their own, but just in a really intimate way. Yeah, the biggest thing that I think I really want to say about this department is how much of its origin story is so rooted in Caribbeanist scholars, Caribbeanist thinking, Caribbeanist philosophies, and attention to true attention to diaspora and diasporic formations. Yeah, so I think creating an archive, whatever that means at the stage I'm at right now, has been interesting, especially because of how my impulses and my own alignments are like definitely guiding the narrative that I'm forming in my head, but also being cognizant of what it means to be in this position, and knowing that truly cataloging this means needing to look past that, which has made me a better listener, I think, because now I'm wanting to listen to everything that everyone in the department is saying, so that if I see any object that I think might be of interest to them, I'm like immediately texting people like, oh my goodness, I saw this undergrad student in 1993 wrote this essay about like Black women's spirituality and healing. And librarians and archivists are amazing listeners. I know that's something that we all know, but it's truly amazing seeing the process of that, like why it is that librarians are specifically great listeners, because it's so exciting to see all of these beautiful things that have happened in the department and want to share it with the people who I think are going to appreciate it the most. And for different people, that's different things. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. But the last thing I'll say is I'll just note some of the most amazing finds so far, sorting through all of these things, which I could say like 200 of them. But I'll say 3. First is a decolonization colloquium that happened housed by our department in the late 70s. The St. Clair Drake Symposium that has been happening since the 90s. And I actually just came across in 1994, Miss Muse did a presentation. And my personal favorite that has like brought me to tears, that we still haven't seen because we're also in the process of getting sorted to try and digitize a lot of things so that people have access to them, is Walter Rodney's visit here in 1981, which is just so incredible to me. Yeah, I don't know how many things I've answered, but that's my thing.
Thank you. Caribbean-centric focus. The Caribbean-centric focus of the department has a lot to do with Dr. Barbara Christian and Dr. Vive Clark. And both, especially Vive, was insistent that the diaspora be the arc for the department. That was not a piece of cake battle in the beginning, but people saw the power of it and what it has done, not only for the department, but for the university and other departments across the country and around the world. So you're doing important work, Francesca, very important. So Josh Davis, Dr. Davis has become a member of my advisory board for the Daphne Muse Letters Correspondence Collection. And he invited me to Baltimore to speak to his class in 2019. He is an associate professor of history at the University of Baltimore, focusing on social movements, policing, capitalism, and African-American history. He is currently writing Politics Against the Movement, the Forgotten Sabotage of the Civil Rights Struggle, under contract with Princeton University Press, a narrative history of radical civil rights organizers in the 1960s who challenged police abuses and the police who retaliated against them with surveillance, infiltration, and legal persecution. His first book, From Head Shops to Whole Foods, The Rise and Fall of Activist Entrepreneurs, explores how businesses such as organic food stores, feminist businesses, and African-American bookstores emerged from social movements of the 60s and 70s. He's also the co-editor of Baltimore Revisited, Stories of Resistance and Inequality in a U.S. Citizen. His research has been supported by fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Fulbright Scholar Program. He's written for The Atlantic, The Nation, Jacobin, and Washington Post, and his work has been highlighted in the New York Times, CNN, PBS, and Slate. Josh?
I'm gonna go over here. The mic. This one, right? Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Let's see. Okay. I think my foot just hit something down. All right. I don't know what. I could feel something right there. Sorry about that. Inside there, I think. Yeah. There we go. How do we play slideshow? Yeah. No. Okay. Sorry about that little plot twist. It's really exciting to be here. It's really an honor to be here. I wanted to thank you, Daphne, for inviting me, the department, and it's my first time in California since the pandemic and my first time in the Bay in 5 years. And it's just wonderful to be out here in such an incredible supportive audience. And so you said 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to do this. And when Daphne came to visit in Baltimore in 2019, it was like a lightning bolt for our students. University of Baltimore is a small urban commuter school, and we have guest speakers for sure, but it's hard to get people to come because we can't usually pay, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for these big speakers. And a lot of our students haven't really encountered elders like Ms. Muse. And when I was going through Daphne's archives yesterday, I came across so many incredible holdings. One of them was a packet of letters from students in my class that they had written to her. And it was just amazing seeing those again. But, just in 2 hours yesterday, I saw materials, handwritten letters from Nikki Giovanni, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Afeni Shakur talking about her young son, Tupac, how happy he is to start school. Amy Jacques Garvey, Shirley Graham Du Bois. I mean, that's, you know, I barely got into the archive. That's what's kind of scary. So I got to show up an old picture, which is just a wonderful shot. But I'm going to be talking about two very different types of archives that Daphne has intersected with and is very much a part of, very different archives. I first met Daphne in the process of writing my book, From Head Shops to Whole Foods, which has a chapter on Black-owned bookstores and especially how they grew out of the Black Power movement in the 60s and 70s. And Drum and Spear bookstore, where Daphne worked, was in some ways kind of the quintessential movement bookstore coming out of the Black Power movement. It was set up by a group of veterans from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, in DC just a month after Dr. King's assassination and murder. And DC, you know, was a lot of people didn't understand why they were starting this bookstore. This is a picture of the interior. But I think a lot of people forget that bookstores, especially Black bookstores, are archives themselves. By definition, bookstores are supposed to sell things, move product, but it seems like a lot of booksellers are crazy collectors. No coincidence. And I mean crazy in the best way. But yeah, they love to sell stuff, but more than that, they love to read stuff. And it's hard to read stuff if you get rid of stuff. And I think some of these pictures from the interior, this is from 1969. I mean, you can just see already how this store is really, in some ways, just an incredible site of commemoration and ephemera. And Black bookstores really launched a lot of collectors' careers. Una Molzak in New York, Liberation Books, and Ed Vaughn in Detroit, and just so many bookstores. And this incredible catalog that they put out in 1971, there's very few copies of it. Daphne has at least one. The Library of Congress has one. You can literally just request from the stacks and hold it. And I think it's bound even. Incredible catalog that, you know, again, they weren't just selling books. These are suggested readings for raising consciousness. And so many people who came out of this store were incredible and are incredible collectors. You know, people like Judy Richardson, another SNCC veteran. And so many people who came out of this store ended up going into creating media, curating, from writing, publishing. Judy Richardson, producer on Eyes on the Prize. Charlie Cobb, journalist. Jennifer Lawson, journalist. Just people who created media and commemorated the movement in its history, in its present and its future. So there's that incredible archive that I think in some ways is one of the foundations of your collection, the Drum and Spear days. Now I'm going to talk about a very different archive, one that is more nefarious, but one that we have to talk about. This is, so you know about Daphne's incredible letters collection. This is one of the letters in her collection that she still has. When FBI agent Jim South, who was very interested in Daphne, really wanted to speak with her so badly that when she slammed the door, he left a note for her. Yeah, her name, even his name seems to be difficult. So it's interesting. We were just looking online yesterday at an obituary for an FBI agent by that name, and we weren't sure if it was the right one or not, but
We think it is.
we think it is. People know about the FBI and repression of these movements. Part of what I'm trying to do in my book is to really put police abuses at the center of how we tell the story of the civil rights movement of the 60s, but also to look at activists who were doing work against police. And this is pre-Panthers. This is really SNCC and CORE. folks like that, who are on the radical edge of the civil rights movement. Kind of counterintuitively, FBI records are a good place to find records by police. Police in general destroyed their records much more than even the FBI did. It's a lot harder to get a hold of genuine local police surveillance records are very hard to get a hold of. Only a few cities really preserve them, and that's usually because of federal lawsuits. But, you know, the FBI archive is an archive that was created with pure antagonism for Black activists. And that comes through in so much of the analysis. I'm sure most of us know the really ugly stories of how different organizers were harassed by the Bureau. What's interesting is that so much of what the FBI recorded is very mundane, kind of day-to-day stuff, and in some ways sheds surprising insights. Here is one record about our friend Miss Muse from 1970, where the Bureau is noting her trips to Guyana. You know, we're trying to get more records out of the Bureau. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is the National Archives really holds a ton of FBI records that the Bureau does not. And so we know for a fact that the San Francisco field office has 100 pages of records they've recorded on Ms. Muse. It's going to take us several years to get them, but we're going to get them. This is about Drum and Spear Bookstore. Drum and Spear Bookstore. I got maybe 50 pages about them out of the FBI. I got something like 500 or 600 pages about them from the National Archives. All of Daphne's friends are in there. I mean, we were just talking about, I mean, literally, Tony and Jennifer and Judy and you, and I mean, some of your lifelong friends. You know, one of the things that's surprising, maybe it's not surprising to some of you, but a lot of what the FBI did was just collect clippings, collect stuff. So, you know, when I'm writing this book, I could not get a hold of any other Drum and Spear catalog other than the red picture I showed you already. And then I found in an FBI file, wow, they just reproduced the whole catalog and put it there. It's not the best copy, but they didn't intend that for a historian. But I think putting aside the war on Black activists, there is an archive of value that the FBI collected. Sometimes archives are collected and historians can use them in very different ways. Read against the grain, research against the grain. You know, sometimes they let on the truth about things. Washington field office sources have advised, hey, this bookstore is profitable because of the following reasons. Only Black-owned operated bookstore in DC. So they say. It is located in the heart of the Black community and in close proximity to a large segment of Black Washingtonians. It serves schools, churches, civics groups, and individuals. It will order any book or publication the customer wants. It is a principal supplier of Howard University. And number 8, in comparison, it has a better selection. It's better organized than some well-known bookstores in downtown Washington, D.C. Yeah. That's an endorsement in a very strange way, right? It's obviously patronizing, condescending, but the truth shines through in very strange ways in FBI records at times, especially this kind of collecting. Oh, I did it again. Is it back? Oh, there we go. Okay, everyone be careful about this if you're, I'm gonna wrap up because just wanna show a few other things. I just saw this yesterday. We were looking at this. Here, the FBI is saying, we're considering closing the case because it appears this is a legitimate commercial enterprise. But we're going to keep an eye on some of your friends, Charlie Cobb, Cortland Cox, Marvin Holloway, who are associated with the Center for Black Education. Again, when we use these records, it doesn't mean we take the FBI or any other law enforcement agency at face value, but we are also going to recognize they did so much to monitor that they created this unintentional historical record. Very, very quickly, I'm going to say this. Daphne has a story about when she moved, you were moving to Phoenix, right? And mailed some of her stuff to go from DC to Phoenix, and some of the stuff never came. A strange, as you said, hippie mailman delivered the mail one day. You never seen him before. The envelope was torn open. You got your degree in there that you had mailed, but a lot of the stuff was missing. I thought of that, and then years later learned about how extensive the FBI's mail opening program was in this period. And they did congressional hearings in the Church Commission in the mid-70s, CIA and FBI, and how they were digging into people's mail. You know, this is kind of the ugly side of letters in this period, just like, you know, emails today, surveillance. But I think this, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. This is another FBI record I had at the end from Daphne's travels, but we're talking about very different archives in places we don't always expect them. And they're very critical to confront these archives if we want to commemorate your history or any other organizer's history out of that era. So I'm just really honored to have been invited, and thank you, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
I just want to note, they delivered my Scrabble set and my diploma unwrapped to my parents' home. This was not the brightest bunch. They kept all my Marcus Garvey books and all my Du Bois books, which I've never gotten. These were all first editions. I don't have a single one of those. The Scrabble set they could have kept, and at that point I was a little PO'd with fists. They could have kept that too, but I'm not as PO'd with them. Anyway, Kathy Neal. Ms. Neal has been Associate University Archivist since 2005 and is responsible for collecting materials related to campus history. Before coming to UC Berkeley, she held archivist and curatorial positions at the University of Iowa, University of Minnesota, and San Diego State. She earned her bachelor's in English from Carleton College, a master's degree in journalism and mass communications from the University of Minnesota, and a master's degree in information library studies with an archival administration concentration from the University of Michigan. Ms. Neal.
Well, thank you, Ms. Muse, Daphne, for the lovely introduction, and also thank you to the Black Studies Collaboratory for inviting me to participate on this outstanding panel. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about the variety of historical resources relating to Black lives and experiences that are available for research at the Bancroft Library. In 1919, journalist, scholar, and activist Delilah Beasley published her groundbreaking history of Black trailblazers in California. She had spent 8.5 years traveling through the state conducting research, and one of the libraries that she used heavily was the Bancroft Library here on the UC Berkeley campus. And she studied California archival records and the state's early newspapers, including early Black newspapers. A century later, Bancroft continues to be the primary special collections library on campus. It has been located in the Doe Library Annex since 1950, just northwest of the Campanile. Our major collecting areas include Western Americana, which is still the largest and most diverse group of materials, Latin Americana, rare books and literary manuscripts, university archives, history of science and technology, and pictorial collections. We also have 3 research programs: the Center for Teptunis Papyri, the Mark Twain Papers and Project, and the Oral History Center, which was formerly known as the Regional Oral History Office. So for many years, the Bancroft Library has been actively building rich research collections in African Americana that include organizational records, personal and family papers, printed collections, pictorial collections, and oral histories, among other historically valuable materials. The library places particular emphasis on the history of African Americans in the American West. Bancroft serves as the repository for several local African American organizations, such as the NAACP West Coast region, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porter Records, and the Black Scholar Journal. There are also materials relating to church-affiliated groups and private individuals, such as the Kraft Trotter family, Hamilton T. Boswell, and Jeremiah Burke Sanderson. Manuscript and archival collections documenting Black activism can also be found in collections such as the Eldridge Cleaver Papers, the Social Protest Collection, and the Free Speech Movement records. The Black presence in Mexico and Central America is represented in the Latin Americana collection through several books and manuscript materials. For example, Bancroft houses proclamations and correspondence of Pico Pío, which date from 1845 to 1846. Pico was the last governor of California under Mexican rule, and he had African as well as indigenous and Spanish ancestry. Among the nearly 1,000 20th century graphic artworks produced by Mexico City's foremost political print shop, Taller Gráfica Popular, or TGP, Popular Graphic Arts Workshop, are prints of African-American sculptor and graphic artist Elizabeth Catlett, who began working with TGP in 1946. For several decades, the Bancroft Library has successfully collected almost everything published by or about major Black writers, including pamphlets, broadsides, introductions, prefaces, and important critical and biographical material. We have issues of the Elevator and the Pacific Appeal, which was the first African-American newspaper in the state of California, and launched in 1978. Bancroft's African-American Writers Collection contains thousands of books, manuscripts, correspondence, photographs, and other rare works by Black authors, ranging in date from 1790s to the present. We also have the papers of many notable writers, such as Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, Ted Jones, and J. California Cooper, along with the papers of still active S. Diane Bogus, a lesbian author, publisher, educator, and spiritual leader, and the records of her New Age feminist book company, Woman in the Moon Publications. Bancroft also houses two outstanding personal libraries, and one is the Leon F. Litwack Library of African American History and Culture, a historian and longtime UC Berkeley professor who passed away last summer. Professor Litwack started collecting books relating to African American history and culture in the 1940s. And highlights of his extensive collection include Bobby Seale's copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X, and Ida B. Wells's very rare and important pamphlet on lynching, The Red Record, which continues to be relevant today. The other collection is the Library of Daphne Muse. Say that her reach seems to be everywhere and glorious. Ms. Muse's collection is especially strong in works by Harlem Renaissance authors, poetry broadsides, and lesser known titles issued by small presses. Highlights in her library include a first edition of Paul Laurence Dunbar's Lyrics of Sunshine and Shadow from 1905, and a copy of the volume City of Boston, issued in 1889 to honor Black Revolutionary War hero Crispus Attucks. Bancroft's photographic and pictorial collections document African Americans in the Bay Area, family life, formal portraits, social activities, activism, and many other aspects of life. There's extensive documentation of African Americans in the Bay Area, and this includes the work of photographer David Johnson, who's the first Black photographer whose archive has been acquired by the Bancroft Library. That happened in just in 2016. Mr. Johnson opened his photography studio in 1951, and he focused on taking images of the Black community in San Francisco, and especially the Fillmore district until the mid-1960s. Other examples of collections with rich research sources are Stephen Seamus's photographs relating to the Black Panthers, Michelle Vignes's photographs documenting the blues in the San Francisco Bay Area, Rosalie Ritz's courtroom dramas documenting many prominent court cases involving African Americans, and photographs of various Black authors, including Alice Walker, Al Young, James Baldwin, and Gwendolyn Brooks, taken during their visits to the Berkeley campus, and in the various newspaper photographic archives that we house. The University Archives, which is my collecting specialty, houses a growing amount of materials that relate to the history of African Americans on the UC Berkeley campus particularly. And some of these institutional records are campus status reports relating to Black students, staff, and faculty, and a number of student publications ranging from handbills from the 1969 Third World Liberation Strike to and other protest literature, to newspapers and newsletters such as Black Thoughts and Word. The archives also include documentation of some notable campus events, such as writer James Baldwin's visit in 1979. And faculty and administrative papers make up another significant segment of archival sources. And just a few examples include David Blackwell, who was the first Black full professor on the campus, and Barbara Christian, the first Black female tenured professor here, as well as the papers of Zeve Clark, Joelle Taylor Gibbs, and Halifu Osumare, and Administrator Norvell Smith, just to name a few. Finally, the archives contain selected collections of selected alumni, which document their lives and experiences. The Oral History Center has documented several oral history interviews with Black Americans, and these include interviews with African Americans in the Rosie the Riveter World War II American Warfront Project, and Emeritus Professor Robert Allen's interviews with survivors of the Port Chicago Naval Magazine explosion and the mutiny trial that followed. The African American Faculty and Senior Staff Project featured interviews with UC Berkeley professors from a variety of academic disciplines, including Troy Duster, Margaret Wilkerson, Harry Edwards, William Lester, and Ollie Wilson, and former staff, including Michelle Woods Jones and Henrietta Harris. A number of Black Cal alumni also have been interviewed over the years, and more interviews can be found within a themed oral history series that the center has produced, including a recent interview with Aaron Mayer, environmental justice leader and the first African-American president of the Sierra Club, and a second interview conducted with former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. And I'll just step away from my script just to say that the transcripts of these oral history interviews are available online in their entirety. So I encourage you to take advantage of that in your research too. And so these are only a few examples of the rich resources that can be used in the Bancroft Library. And so I just wanted to say just a little bit about how to use the library. We're open to the public. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Right now, we're open by appointment that you can schedule an appointment online, still due to COVID. We have non-circulating materials because, of course, they're unique or rare, and you can register as a researcher, request materials, and as I said, schedule your appointments through creating an account on Aon, which is our special collections request system. And I can give you some additional information to learn more about Bancroft's collections, but you can look at the UC Library Search, which is the campus online catalog. The Online Archive of California has the finding aids or guides to the majority of our collections. And then there are Calisphere and the UC Berkeley Library Digital Collections Platform that includes a wide variety of digitized images and text. And so I wanted to say one more thing about opportunities at the Bancroft Library. Bancroft offers some student fellowships and awards to graduate and undergraduate students to support using Bancroft Library materials. And in 2016, 2017, a doctoral candidate in African diaspora studies received a Bancroft Library Study Award to pursue her research on Gwendolyn Brooks's interest in the mundane and the ordinary. And so she analyzed Gwendolyn Brooks's appointment books that are in her collection that I think a lot of people might, think, the appointment books that you keep, they're just for you and nobody would care about them. But she gave a fascinating presentation at the Bancroft Library Roundtable, which is a speaker series that we offer. And the Oral History Center offers introductory workshops and summer institutes. There's a one-day introductory workshop that they offer, and that tends to take place in February, and they're intended to teach the fundamentals, the nuts and bolts of conducting oral histories. They also sponsor an annual Advanced Oral History Summer Institute that's typically in August, and it lasts for a week, and it teaches the methodology and theory and practice of oral history. And they say on their website that it's designed for graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, university faculty, independent scholars, and museum and community-based historians who engage in oral history work. So I'll just end by saying that we at Bancroft are honored to have the opportunity to collect and preserve and make these important materials available for use and to play a part in documenting Black lives and culture for the next century and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I'd just like to point out that Gwendolyn Brooks' tax returns are in the archive. Miss Brooks made hella bank in 1951. And there's a priceless letter in there from Chiki Diop Leopold Senghor, saying he thought she was the finest poet in the world. And it brought me to tears. All right, so Lisbeth Telfson. Lisbeth is an Oakland, California-based community archivist, collector, and curator. Her collections focus on the late 20th century African Americana with specialization including the Black Panther Party, Angela Davis, Black LGBT culture, and political graphics. Her archives are used frequently for academic research, film and media projects, and exhibitions, most recently as the basis for the exhibit for Angela Davis Seize the Time, currently on display at the Zimmerly Art Museum in New Jersey, traveling to the Oakland Museum in October 2022. The exhibit was the basis for the book Angela Davis Seize the Time, published in 2020 by Hermer Verlag. Lisbeth.
Hello. First off, I want to thank you for inviting me to do this, Daphne, because as I say often, I don't do a lot of public speaking, not my favorite thing. So thank you for getting me out. So my name is Lisbeth Tellefson, and I want to say first and foremost, I'm a collector, which is a different breed than a community archivist, which is a different breed in my mind from an archivist. And I grew up in Berkeley, a stone's throw from this campus, Ellsworth and Ashby. And I grew up in the 60s where collecting was a thing. Like literally every full tank of gas came with an antenna ball. Our parents saved S&H and blue chip stamps and turned them into toasters. So collecting was a thing. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, but, you know, the closest store to where we grew up was a hobby shop that just literally sucked up the allowance of every kid in a 6-block radius. So collecting is in my DNA. I grew up in like an eclectic village of immigrants, organizers, Black communists and former communists, and just all manner of lefties and single moms. And one of the things as I look back on my story is, as an international kid, I traveled a lot. I was put on a plane to a country usually where I didn't speak the language. And I would have a little suitcase where wherever I went, I would pick up a memento like programs, matchbooks. Because I didn't have a great memory, I would come home and I would lay all the stuff out on my bed and kind of early on started to use objects as external memory. So that's just parked in my backstory. The elders in my village were folks like my grandfather figure, Matt Crawford, who in his 90 years had 6+ decades of activism. He was close personal friends with folks like Paul Robeson and Langston Hughes and Louise Thompson Patterson. And, you know, when I was dragged around to his friends' houses, I was always usually the only kid because their own kids were long gone. And all of their houses kind of morphed into the same thing in my mind. They had bookcases overflowing with books. Every bit of wall space and surface was covered with artwork and artifacts of their travels. And so from a young age, I kind of just ingested that that's how you did adulting. You know, you grow up, you'd go out into the world, you'd travel and see things, you'd rabble rouse and fight the good fight, and you'd pick up, you know, your mementos and come back and live amongst, you know, the adventures of your life. So, and perhaps most influentially, Matt was his generation's keeper of the papers. He was the record keeper in the organizations that he was active in, like the National Negro Congress and the Council for Civic Unity. In 1932, he was among a group of young African Americans, including Louise Thompson, Langston Hughes, that went to the Soviet Union to make a film on Black life called Black and White in the Soviet Union. And even though the film never got made, serious adventures were had. And I discovered many of those stories when I helped Matt organize his papers in the 90s, and that collection is now at Emory. So that was really my first archival project where I got to see that materials, old materials that 99.9% of the population would have thrown away decades ago as junk, that there was a certain segment of us that had a different gene that would hold on to that stuff and later be able to realize their value. So my journey to creating adventures began in my 20s when I co-founded a Black lesbian journal called Ashe. And Natosha actually walked in. I didn't bring any props today, but somebody walked in with archives. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they live. This was in 1989, which, though I wouldn't recognize it at the time, was kind of a Harlem Renaissance moment for Black gay folk. It was an explosive moment where folks like Marlon Riggs, who taught here and made a singular film called Tongues Untied that to this day, anybody interested in Black gay culture has to go find this film. But it was a Renaissance moment, and folks I was working alongside and being mentored by were people like Audre Lorde and Pat Parker. And, because we were a publication, we were like an information nexus for everything Black, gay, lesbian, of color globally. Like literally we were on everybody's mailing list. And, the first Black gay organization in South Africa, we had an exchange organized by Audre Lorde of Afro-German women coming to stay with us and going back and forth. There was a lot of cross-pollination in so many different areas. And my skills as a pack rat were like so prescient. And so, I had boxes and boxes and boxes and 20 years of paying for storage space. So in 2010, my partner, who'd been a leader in the Black Panther Party, had gotten some old boxes of trial material, things she didn't even want in the house. And I got a peek at the process by which major institutions acquire collections. And it just, it really got me thinking. And I was talking to one of my antiquarian book dealers, and I'm like, do you think anybody would be interested in a Black LGBT time capsule? And their response was like a cross between like, hell yeah and duh. And so I was like, the 20 years that transpired between the material being generated and being considered history, I recognized that it was also correlating to the 20 years of career trajectory between, the women who subscribed to Ashe and contributed and wrote for us, and who I jokingly referred to as the professional students. Well, they were now all professors teaching this history, and some of them had even risen to, decision-making status in what collections would be acquired and what history was needed to target to fill in gaps in archival holdings. So in 2011, Yale University's Beinecke acquired those 20 boxes of old paper, and the Lisbeth Tellefsen papers were born. And surprisingly to me, because institutions can acquire collection, put them in the basement, and if they don't get processed, nobody's seeing them for however long, if ever. But they process it really quickly. We were featured in one of their exhibits called The Art of Collaboration, where the Ashe Archives has a dedicated kiosk down the hall from the Gutenberg Bible, sandwiched in between like Richard Wright and Andy Warhol. And I'm like, and it even made a top 10 list for African-American women's holdings at Yale. And so, I am surrounded by activists and organizers and artivists, and they are no doubt changing the world. And yet to a person, if I approach them and say, are you thinking about your papers? Have you thought about your papers? They're like, what papers? I don't have papers. I don't, and I'm like, do you write? Do you text?
Yeah.
Do you generate copious material about your life? And, I have found that's where I come in, that, I am actively translating that gap between the institutions, and the streets, because that's the history that is missing. So For the past decade, I've been working on creating a pipeline to deliver underrepresented histories into, finding institutional forever homes. I've placed material at Emory, Stanford, Yale, SF MoMA, the Smithsonian, not UC Berkeley yet, but I'm working on it. Oh, I'll pitch you. Currently, I have some of my biggest projects. I'm working with 2 photographers, one of whom was the Black Panther Party's main in-house photographer. 170 rolls, over 4,000 frames, most of them shot inside the Black Panther Party's flagship educational program, the Oakland Community School. Never before seen history. And the first thing we did was digitize every freaking frame. We have 4,635 frames, high-res archival tips. I'm also working with a photographer named Shelby Cohn, who was a photographer for an important women-run erotic magazine called On Our Backs. She shot many of the absolutely iconic images that those of us coming up in the community in the 80s and 90s would instantly recognize. And she was one of the few photographers who documented the bars and the underground clubs that were the beginning of the lesbian sex positive movement. And this month, Cornell actually mined their own archives of their expansive Cornell Human Sexuality collection. And they just launched a major exhibit, Radical Desire, Making On Our Backs magazine. So 20 years, 30 years later, this material is being recognized for its trailblazing role in shaping political discourse on lesbian sex and sexuality. So, I just want to say that, we are making history today, and it is incumbent upon us and every generation to make sure that history is preserved, and it's on every one of us. Wrapping up, I wanted to give a shout out to my late mentor, Michael Rossman, who was a TA at UC Berkeley in the 60s, and he became active in the free speech movement. And in his free time, he took it upon himself to gather all the posters that were, documenting the goings on in and around campus. And that became a lifelong pursuit. And after his death, his collection of 25,000 political posters was donated to the Oakland Museum, which tasked a colleague, Lincoln Cushing, and I with digitizing every single one of them. And that resource is now used globally because it's online via the Oakland Museum. So, there are movements happening today that'll be studied, analyzed, and written about by future generations. And while professional archivists are tasked with processing and preserving and doing that work, the long-term management of these collections, I'm just a strong advocate for the role of someone in the community who has that gene, taking it upon themselves to find what tranche of history you are going to make sure survives in the historic record. So anyway, thank you.
And every time I go to Lisbeth's compound, she has a new collection that she's working through, and everything is meticulously organized and in folders and preserved like she's preserving a palace. I mean, it's just remarkable. And it's become one of my heartbeats to see the work that she does. I have to take this off. To see the work that she does and how she does it. And one of the reasons I brought this particular panel together, I really wanted people to see the breadth of archiving, that it's not just in the academy, that everyday people are collecting things that absolutely matter and that are critical to our lives in the moment and in the future. because Afrofuturism is real, y'all. We gonna keep on keeping on. And in order to keep the keeping on, we have to have these foundations strong. And we cannot allow the fascism sweeping the world at this point in time to erase us in any way, in any way. I'd like to introduce my ever ready, steady research assistant, Abigail Simmons. Abby has been remarkable. As Professors Rayford and Paschal read the scholarly tea leaves, their appointment of Simmons as my research assistant was a perfect intellectual alignment, resulting in Abby coming into formation as an emerging archivist. As a 2022 McNair Scholar, their work investigates digital Black dance as labor on the social media application of TikTok, or as I call it, tiki-taki. She has just been so wonderful to work with, and her Abby's working with me has also brought in the interest of two others. Grant Yackel, who's also a fellow, is now the manager of the Oasis in the Diaspora bookstore, sorting through some 12,000 books that Miss Muse still has. And Alicia Hager has joined us as well. And I told the other day, those tennis shoes Alicia has on, I said, see, them gonna be in an archive too one day. And all of this fashion that you young people are wearing, it's gonna be in archives. It's gonna tell stories that are beyond belief and amazing. Abby has we've asked you to write down questions, and she's gonna collect the questions, and then we're gonna answer the questions, and then Bamadeli is also going to, the documents that some of you have submitted online and have brought, he's going to go through and discuss them in concert with the rest of my team. This is now my team, y'all. And there is a manila folder on the table over there. There are copies of some of my letters, and you're more than welcome to take a letter out and read it and pass the letter. Thank you, sir. Would you pass the letters around? Take one, and you're more than welcome to read the letters and then put them back in the folder. They're copies, so you don't have to worry about wearing the archival gloves. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. I have a question from Zoom here. This is from April L. Graham Jackson, and they want you all to discuss the sounds of the diaspora, struggling to locate recordings of sound, extracting sound from VHS tapes. Speaking to this, they gave the examples of sounds produced from Black gatherings like family reunions or parties. And you can pass your questions to the front while we're discussing this.
Who wants to take that? Well, there's the collection at, is she talking about recordings or just VHS?
I think they're interested in sound, but they did give the example of VHS.
There's the Motown Museum has collected a lot of material from the Motown era. So there's that I know of. And then a number of the hip hop artists are collecting as they go along. They're seemingly doing a really great job of documenting hip hop. Dr. Dre donated his collection, I think, well, donated or sold his collection to USC, probably sold it to USC. And yeah, he sold it. And so the archival trail of hip hop, I think, is very well documented, not only in the US, but around the world. but I don't know a whole lot about that area. Maybe there are others listed.
I'll say one thing. The first thing that I thought about was the Pacifica archives. Like there's
Yes.
a lot of, there's just so much history there of events going back decades. And it's already an audio archive. So as rough source material, there would be a lot there. I also want to give a shout out in the room to Claude Marks of the Freedom Archives.
Oh, yes,
Which
yes.
now, Claude, can you raise your hand somewhere? There you are. Yeah. Oh, awesome. So the Freedom Archives, we are lucky enough to now have home in the East Bay. They're in North Berkeley, and they are sitting on a singular archive of radical political history. And much of it is digitized. They have apprenticeships or internships. Anyway, you should look him up at the end if you're interested in that, because it's an incredible resource for all manner of digital collections.
And we have actually, we did a listing of essential archives, and there are handouts of it outside, but you can also find it online. And I just thought about two other, the Library of Congress has an extensive collection of all kinds of recordings dating back to, I think, the probably late 19th century. And Rutgers has a jazz collection that is off the chain. I went there in 1987 and I got to see the collection then, and it was massive. So I can only imagine what it looks like now. And someone must have done a compilation of the various sound recordings or some kind of anthology. So that's something I'm going to ask Ms. Simmons to do a little background research on and see what she might come up with.
And I have, I would suggest that if anyone is interested in early 20th century recordings, Bill Doggett, who is a collector, an archivist, and as well as a photographer, has done work in this area. He's one of the few collectors of early 20th century materials, so recorded materials. So at the early period that such records were made.
And I'll add that Stanford has an archive of recorded sound, and then along with, in terms of documenting hip hop, along with USC, Cornell University has been documenting hip hop as well.
Francesca? Francesca?
Yeah, just these are all really beautiful suggestions, and also a part of the question to me, I don't know if I misinterpreted it, but it did sound a little bit personal, especially with the note about family functions in there. And I don't have an answer to the question, but I just have a tip because I think about that also a lot. I'm like very obsessed with documenting my family's family functions for really specific reasons, especially surrounding music. Oh, but apart from that, another place that documents sound and like sonic things really well is Fania All Stars Instagram page. It's actually really amazing. And it's super accessible because it's an Instagram page. But California Revealed, which is based in California. So they do an application every year, but whatever you apply for to be digitized has to have some kind of significance for California history. So if this is like a personal project in terms of like, I want to extract sound for VHS from VHS tapes, that might be a route to go through if you can find a way to market it as significant to California history if you're from here and your family's from here and your family functions are important to you in that way. But I think about that a lot. Yeah. And I just do voice recordings of my family's parties. And whenever my dad or like elders in my family talk, I literally just record it on my phone.
Yeah. It's a really good question, and it's one that has a really hard answers. I mean, just briefly, I was part of a project to document Black radio in North Carolina back in the 70s, a station called WAFR, which was the only station in the country that really devoted itself to Black nationalism. And I'm part of a larger effort at the Library of Congress called the Radio Preservation Task Force. And the issue of preserving magnetic tape is really, really kind of bedeviling a lot of archivists. One, because of the time constraints, the expertise that's required, things like sticky shed syndrome. It's very, very expensive to digitize the stuff, and the archives that can do it have incredibly long backlogs of work they need to do, and the stuff is deteriorating. And the closer that an audio recording is to like something casual, like a crowd scene, the more likely it's on an outdated format, that it's in someone's basement, that it's been exposed to the elements. And so in some ways, even though those technologies were very sophisticated in their time, in some ways they're the hardest to preserve versus like paper ephemera. And so it's also really similar with like TV recordings and stuff like that. We have a really excellent archive in Baltimore called the Mid-Atlantic Moving Image Archive, Marmia, and they're devoted to local television. And it's really hard work, really expensive work.
Okay, let's do 2 more questions and then we're going to move into having Bamadeli evaluate some of the documents that people have brought.
Sure. This question is from the in-person audience, and it says, I'm sure this answer could be everything, but what is the single archival artifact or document that you guard with your life? What's the story you carry with this particular artifact?
What's the archival?
Okay, I'll start. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Lisbeth, I feel so happy that you're here and that I'm on this table with you. You're so amazing, and Ashes was and is so amazing, and it's so important to me. So I'm just so happy to be in your presence. And yeah, I think also I related to a lot about what you were saying in terms of personal collections, and like I feel almost like I just feel like it's so urgently, like I had to do so much work to get past constant agitation over how much I want to protect things and just like have it be like a pleasurable experience instead of like a really scary one. But I think for me personally, on the route that Lisbeth was talking about, I have a picture of my great aunt who I've never met, but who's really important to my family and who has a lot of the stories that nation states refuse to disseminate and like have made concerted efforts to specifically erase and to make us think literally are not possible, even beyond erasure. And I have one single picture of her from my aunt, and that picture is the most important thing to me in the world because it is literally, Lisbeth said, objects as external memory. That is an object that reminds me how important archiving is in a way that surpasses all of these questions of what we risk when the state knows what we're doing, because it's really a personal affair, it's a family affair. Yeah, that picture means a lot to me because it makes me think about community members doing that collection work and things like that. And also how you honor your family stories when nation states are literally telling you that they don't exist.
Josh?
Hard question. I don't know my birth certificate. Like I only need it like every 10 years because the DMV or someone requires it. But if you've ever lost a birth certificate, you know how incredibly hard it is to replace and how precious they are. And then how many people don't even have the privilege of having a birth certificate. That becomes a real issue when you're doing historical work, especially the history of people of color around the world and people from low income backgrounds where literally the vital statistics bureaucracy of the state valued their lives less. And so in all honesty, birth certificates really are just absolutely invaluable when you can find them.
Kathy?
Well, my first thought was along those lines, I guess my social security card, which I still have. But then also I would say just personally, I have a photo of my my mother who who died when I was very young, and it's a photo of her from high school, and it's not something that I could easily replace. It's from the 50s, and it's my tie to her and the rest of my family, as you know, as generations pass.
Oh, well, I usually answer this question with some like fancy Faith Ringgold print or something, but you, hands down, my most important archival artifact. I found some years ago, I was in my favorite antiquarian bookstore, Bellarium in the Mission. And through some circumstances, I was in their storeroom and I pull out this copy of a magazine. It's so tight, I don't even know what it is. And it turns out it's a January 1969 edition of the Bay Viewer, which was Hunter's Point Black magazine. It flips open and I see this face that I don't recognize, but I recognize the word Mingo Turner, J. Mingo Turner. My father's name, who I did not know, was John Mingo Turner. And this magazine has flipped open to the first photograph of my father I'm ever
Oh,
seeing.
my word.
That's what I said. I'm in the bookstore going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The guy's like, are you all right? I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I scanned that picture and I put it on Ancestry. So now my father had a picture on the family tree. I was raised only child, single mom. That picture, a year later, a young man who Googled his father's name since the dawn of the internet, all of a sudden popped up a picture. He's like, Mom, is this my dad? Yep, that's him. Took him 24 hours to find me, his sister. That has since.
And so it's the most important artifact that has been handed down from me. But when I became an adult, you know, my grandfather would always tell us stories, and I listened attentively, and he would also sometimes pass on some mementos of family, a family history, like my great grandfather's toolbox. I have it, so that's very important to me. But also my great grandparents, he saved their coin purses, his mother and his father, and they had uh, nickels and pennies in those coin purses. And so I have that today as evidence or material culture of my family's existence.
Wow.
So it's hard to talk about that and not become emotional, but coins. And so that's one reason why at a very early age, my grandfather started me out as a coin collector.
So my most valued piece in my collection now just came into it on March 10th, when my mother turned 100 years old. And she was interviewed by the office of the mayor in Washington, D.C. And I have a clip of the interview. And I'm still just amazed that Betty Goshen Muse raised 5 hard-headed children, 4 of them who were boys, and navigated a life that got her to be 100 years old. And my mother can still thread a needle. And she has 85% of her memory. And we asked her, how did you get here? And she's devout in her religion. And she said, God, and I breathed. And I just keep breathing. So that is the thing I absolutely value the most. And one other that I just I don't know how I've managed to keep it. I have my great grandmother's rocking chair from when she was a child, and I am named after her. And that rocking chair sits in the entryway of my home. So Bamadeli, the show is yours now. We want you to look at these items that people have brought in. If you have other things that you want to bring forward for him to evaluate. This is roadshow without the appraisal. It's just the evaluation.
Well, yes,
And
thank you, because in the museums, we don't do appraisals.
yes,
Thank you.
yes, yes. And afterwards, we will gather down in the reading room, down on the 6th floor to continue anybody who wants to continue mixing it up. And we'd all like to have an opportunity to talk to as many of you as possible. So Bamadeli.
Okay, oh my goodness. Okay, let me first start by saying that all of these materials are very important. I mean, I know that you know that already. But when we're trying to put together an exhibition, or when we're trying to pull together collections of archival collections together, and so often we say that, I've gone into communities and, where, well, we want to create a museum, but we don't have enough information in our own community and so forth. I said, yes, you do. I said, we must mine our own backyards to uncover and recover local stories that are part of our national narratives. And so we all have stories, and so we must mine our own backyard. And for the material culture, or the artifacts that contain the stuff of our existence, or perhaps I should say the marrow of our existence. These are mnemonic devices. And although I understand that the term ephemera is used, I try not to use that term, because these are profound documents. Okay, and with that, whose material? Oh, the Black family? Oh, oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I would suggest that you put these in sleeves, and archival sleeves. Yeah, but you would want to make sure that it does not off gas. You would want to make sure that it's perhaps Mylar. You can get them through online from Gaylord, which is a company that provides different different materials for archiving. Yeah, Gaylord. And you might want to get clamshell boxes as well. You want to make sure that you have archivally safe material. And there are some of you who are archivists. I'm not an archivist, I'm an anthropologist. But because I work in a museum that has an archives, this is just very important. And it's so important that we don't want to lose material from non-care. Okay, do any of you have comments on?
I will say that you have several options, but I like to do kind of a hybrid so that you can actually look at the material and sometimes even share the material without it being damaged. So a clamshell box, for example, is it's self-contained, it's all one piece. So it can be protected from dust and sunlight, and they can have like a D-ring binder inside. You can get archival sleeves that also have the 3 rings in them. And I found that's a nice way to store different documents where you can use them and put them away in a manner that's protected when you're not looking at them.
And when you're handling your material, using archival gloves, washing
Yes.
your hands, not keeping water, any kind of liquids near where you're working on these
Mhm.
materials, and trying to keep them in rooms that are relatively dry where you won't have to worry about mold. So don't store your stuff in the laundry room, on a shelf above the laundry.
Okay, I see, let me start with these. I see that, I'm looking at, these envelopes that have NAACP, and the address 69 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York. Uh, Can you tell us what these are?
My dad, in the late 30s, early 40s, lived Bakersfield, Tulare, and helped found one of the first youth NAACP chapters. And these are just newsletters he received. Some of them are very quite interesting. I brought this interesting one about demanding justice for a lynching in Sykes-Town, Missouri. There's a couple of things in there that really stand out to me. One is that the anti-lynching bill just got passed. This was 1942, February 17th. And they were demanding that the town of Sykes-Town do something. And the town council used the words about the mob that lynched this poor guy. They said, "Oh, we're just folks." And it just brought me back to Trump and Charleston saying, "Fine folks on both sides." In other words, 1942 to 2020, nothing's changed. They justify with the same language. So I have, maybe 10 or 15 of those newsletters. They're very interesting to me, just personally, but they might not. I don't know if the NAACP has these.
Oh, they may or they may not. I hope they do. But I would say that I'm looking at this newsletter that has the date of February 13, 1942, and it's typed. I would suggest that you take these out of the envelope and flatten them out and put them in sleeves so that, you might even want to digitize them. But for right now, you want to make sure that you can have people who are going to have access to them or handle them or touch them will be able to do so safely. So thank you for bringing these in. I only looked at one because I don't want to handle them unnecessarily.
And those two are also that one's from the NAACP. It's a flyer. It might be two flyers. I have more at home. And what was interesting about this was a march for solidarity between different groups in under Roosevelt's administration. And they're calling on the Young Socialist League to join them. They're calling on their Asian Oriental brothers and sisters to join them who have had discrimination. In other words, these movements for Black folks included solidarity with other folks that have been, and I have the letter, I think I stuck it in there, that said that the NAACP youth were working with the Young Socialist League I know Elizabeth and Daphne know these things, about the fact that the socialist communists of the 30s and 40s were very interested in equality and civil rights. And they, in fact, as far as I know, the only political parties in the United States that were at the time interested in equality. So I just thought that was an interesting poster.
Oh, yeah. This one is very interesting, and it's called Declaration of Racial Interdependence. And so it starts out, when in the course of human events, it has become imperative for the youth of the United States to call upon our government and our people for racial justice. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And so this is a language that we're familiar with, but it's a part of the history of social change. And so this is a very important document. I do see that it is deteriorating around the edge. This is another document that I would want to make sure that is that you're able to put it in a flat file or a box, a large archivally safe box, and that you're able to flatten it out. And I see that you have.
These are just things that I've I don't know why most of us my age were very involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And that's the letter that's supporting the document that.
Oh, yes, the NAACP, April 27, 1942, to all youth councils and college chapters. I am very uneasy handling these materials in this manner. Oh, okay. So I'm pleased to say that you have the African Liberation Support Committee from July 1973. There is also a select bibliography of books related to the areas of African and Black American, prepared with the assistance of Dr. Meyer. I don't know the first name. Leslie Meyer. And this is from the Institute of Minority Group Studies at Moorhead College in Minnesota. And so I would say you would also want to be careful that, that you unfold any bended edges. And
Interested in that. I know how I acquired that. But I just thought it was interesting. This was the beginning for me, at least, of demanding Black studies in the late 60s. I know as students in high school in Oakland, we actually led a strike for Black studies to be taught in our schools. And somehow I have that
bibliography.
And then there's another one.
Famous Negro historians and sociologists.
And interestingly enough, some of Drummond Spear's books are mentioned in the bibliography. They're just bibliographies that I've had for years.
Okay, and this sheet has come off of it.
Yeah.
So, putting these items in sleeves become very important. And I want to say thank you for bringing these items in. They are most important. And you've mentioned the fact that the beginning of Black studies. I have to state that
That's not right, but go on.
okay, but I have to state that as a child in the 50s, I was very pleased that my teachers in the segregated schools that I went to in Texas took it on themselves. Not every Negro History Week, I mean, we had that, but anytime it was pertinent, they infused a Black point of view in what needed to be imparted to students.
Wow.
And so I want us to give a shout out to those teachers from many generations ago
Yes.
that had
Yes.
the courage
Yes.
to
Yes.
impart that to us. And, I have to say that I am, I'm not new at this. I'm in my 70s now. And so,
I also want to thank Daphne for giving me one of my most cherished things. How many people in this room have heard of Benjamin Banneker? Oh, that's pretty good.
yeah.
Not a lot, but there's some folks. So in the late 40s, Shirley Graham Du Bois, thank you, wrote a book on the life of Benjamin Banneker. And I'm named after his sweetheart in the book. And of course, Daphne knows this story, and I'd never seen the book. And in maybe the 1980s, I get a call from Daphne. Noli, your most humble servant is on sale at Moe's bookstore. The original copy by Shirley Graham Du Bois, although it says Shirley Graham on the book. And so thanks to Daphne, I ran over to Moe's and I have the book with my name about Benjamin Banneker by Shirley Graham Du Bois. So thank you.
So who do we have next?
We have a publication titled The Black Family, and this was published by the Black Studies Student Association, University of the Streets, Berkeley, California.
Love it.
This is a 1971 publication, volume 1, number 1. And so often these were published sometimes for the first and only time, and sometimes there was a short run. And I'm not from this area, but what I would like to say is that it's important. It's an important document, and the very fact that the focus is on the family is important, especially given the fact that in the 1970s, we were coming out of the federal government issuing a report, the Moynihan Report from the U.S. Department of Labor, and a pernicious image of Black families emerged, particularly Black women. And so such a publication is important. And if this is about the family in the larger sense of the term, meaning the ethnic group, it becomes an important document of how we were trying to chart a pathway of understanding our identity, our culture, and our sense of cohesiveness. And so I want to thank you for bringing that in. This is from Berkeley. Oh, who does this belong to? Oh, okay. Yes, from the University of the Streets.
I love that.
Yeah, February 17th, 1971.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge and offer a moment, like just a quick note about this. Yeah, one, my great friend Rashad gave that to me as a gift for my birthday. So, you know, shout out to Rashad, all love. Yeah, that it was October that Rashad got that for me, and that's in part because I'm playing this role leading this Black Lives at Cal initiative, which is another Black Studies Collaboratory funded project. And our intent is to research, preserve, and celebrate and publicize the legacy of Black folk at Cal since the founding of the university. I'm really excited to be here and identify so strongly with the work that y'all are doing. And have an email waiting for many of you. So I'm like excited that we can be in person. But I also have a flyer that I want to share with y'all because we're doing a launch event on Friday, April 29th, where we'll launch a website and a logo. And we're eager to collaborate with many of y'all archivists and collectors in celebrating Black life and advancing those legacies.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And what is your
Thank you
name,
for
young
sharing
man?
this document with us.
What is your name? Thank you, Caleb.
Can I add one thing? What is your name?
My name?
Uh-huh.
My nickname's Noli.
Noli.
My real name's Anola.
Anola. You know, I do a lot of work on collections that are discovered in people's basements at estate sales and things like that. And I just really want to give a shout out to those of you who have, whether it's family archives or collections or things like that, that you really give some thought about what outcome you want for them. Because I've seen many projects where people pass collections on and have their children have to decide what's to be done with it. And it can be a source of all kinds of drama. And
Oh, yeah.
you know, to really think about what your goals are, because even a small archival collections would probably be a welcome donation. So you can have papers at, a local institution. I also do a lot of work with institutional auctions where international buyers purchase their historical memorabilia. And there's a lot of, I like to use those because they produce a catalog, which in itself is historic record. So for example, one of those declarations would have a full image and some historical background, and this catalog would live in perpetuity. So just really a shout out to really think ahead of time what you would like done and to write it down. Where are your collections? What do you consider your collections? What would, so that's all.
So we'll take one more, and then after that, those of you who are interested will gather on the 6th floor and continue the discourse, the mixing up. And I think there's food still left, so please help yourselves. The food's delicious, by the way. So why don't we do one more?
Okay.
Because it's 2:30.
Is there another artifact or a document? Well,
Okay,
okay. Oh,
the handsome man.
okay, can you share this with, oh,
The handsome man.
okay.
Oh, this is Miss Muse's handsome man.
Yes, it is.
I'm like, I've seen him before.
I've seen him and he is handsome.
So my aunt by marriage, Marion Muse, she was Marion Jameson. She was from Bowling Green, Kentucky. One of her uncles was a doctor who, when I was in Nashville for my reunion in 1987, she asked me to come up to Bowling Green. This Black doctor had Chinese antiques in his home that were like museum quality antiques. And she wanted to know if I wanted them. And I said, Aunt Marion, I can't afford to truck them across country. I wept. She gave me 8 photographs, and all of them are huge, from her family. These were her uncles. This was not the doctor, but the brother of the doctor. I don't know his name. I think this photograph was taken probably the late 19th century. But talk about Black dignity and excellence. I mean, this man just exudes it. And one of my former students from Mills College, he knows how to do preservation work. She peeled it apart and relined it. She didn't restore it, but she relined it. And then I had it framed, and it hangs in the hallway in my home. One day I'm going to find out exactly who this man is. But the carriage with which so many Black people, the stride with which they carried themselves, the dignity, just everything about us that they try to snuff out. And I just look at his eyes, and I think the photograph also may have been enhanced with some kind of technique, some kind of pens. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know enough about
you're
photography.
You're right on that one.
But he's
It
just
is a
so
photograph.
And he just, every day that I walk out the door, I say, yo, bro.
Well, let me state that when I received the email with this image, and but before I even got to open the image, I saw the term handsome man. I said, I said, oh, okay. Well, but let me state that the importance of this image and importance of all of our photographs is that we see this, the profound sense of dignity in the carriage, as Daphne has already alluded to. He is dressed, he is in a suit and tie. There's a part in the middle of his head. And when I think of this, and I think of this, the carriage, I think about the exhibition that Du Bois put together at the turn of the century, A Small Nation of People, which has since been published as a book a few years ago. And how we use photography since the early days to document our existence and our sense of moving forward. And so I thank you, owner of Handsome Man, for bringing this to us. I do want to, if I can, you included also a letter from a formerly enslaved person, and she wrote a letter to her former owners, and she was inquiring about them because she missed them, and so she was hoping that she wanted them to know that she landed safe in this country or perhaps county, and that everybody is growing and moving along fine. But not everybody had necessarily positive relations with their former owners or former enslavers. And so I said, there are several books that are out now that are collections of stories. There's Dear Master, Letters of a Slave Family, from between particularly Liberia and the United States. And so that's an important set of stories, a set of letters. And then To Address You as My Friend is a relatively new book that just came out, African American Letters to Abraham Lincoln. And so we need to make sure that we don't dismiss the stories that are contained in these letters because they're important. But in the Washington Post, there was an article that was published, I think this year, 2022. The Painful, Cutting, and Brilliant Letters Black People Wrote to Their Former Enslavers. And so there is one by Jordan Anderson in August 7th, 1865. And his owner had invited him to come back and live on the plantation. And so, he said, that he calculated the time that he had given at the time that his wife had given over to his enslavers, and calculated how much that he was owed. And he said that he was owed an amount of $11,680. And then he went on to say, if you fail to pay us for faithful laborers in this past, we can have little faith in your promises in the future. So letters are very important. We cannot lament the fact that we don't have them, but we have to appreciate those that we do have and understand the dynamic range that they cover in terms of emotion, worldview, and perspective on the changing dimensions of life. Thank you so very much.
Again, I want to thank each of you for taking time from the demands of your day to join us. This has been magnificent. I'm glad to have this archival team. And please, please come down to the reading room and continue if you like, and make sure you also get something to eat.
Thank you, Ms.
Right.